here's the situation. There was a open seat in Burnaby, British Columbia, and Burnaby is a large suburb immediately to the east of Vancouver. Now, the leader of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, who's a Sikh, he is from Ontario, but he decided that he wanted a seat in the House of Commons, and so he was looking for a seat that was open. There was a seat that was open in British Columbia, which was a seat that the New Democratic Party had barely won from the Liberal Party in the 2015 election. So he decided to run there. Now, Singh is a Sikh, as mentioned earlier, so he has a great deal of Sikh support. The Sikhs, I should mention, are exceedingly powerful in Canadian politics. They are something like about 1.5% of the population, but they effectively determine leadership races for all the parties because of bloc voting. The Sikhs don't seem to have any particular political views except the advancement of Sikhs. For instance, pushing for more immigration from the Punjab. Now, the Liberals nominated a woman, Karen Wang, who was born in China and raised in China and educated in China to graduation. She came to Canada and she started a daycare business, a daycare franchise. Now, the Conservatives nominated a Korean man named Shin. So we have a situation where there are no white candidates among the three major ones. Now, Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, the former longtime ruler of Singapore, famously said in an interview with The Economist, in multiracial societies, you don't vote in accordance with your economic interests and social interests, you vote in accordance with race and religion. And that is how things got very interesting in Burnaby, because the government, the political parties, and the media do not want to acknowledge this. Now, what do we mean by multiculturalism? Well, in the Canadian context, multiculturalism is dogma. It was promulgated officially by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in 1971. The context of that is that the Liberal Party had defined Canada as a bilingual and bicultural country. Bi meaning English and French. This angered a great many people because until that time, until the 1960s, the French language was isolated to Quebec and, I suppose, northern New Brunswick. The Liberal government forced French to be on every product sold in Canada, which means that there are a fair number of products that are not sold in this country because of the expense of translating this and changing the packaging. And a great many people in English Canada were outraged by this because they saw it as a French takeover of this country, which sounds conspiratorial, but it is to a fair degree true. Because of official bilingualism, people from Quebec are given an advantage in applying for federal jobs, such that the Quebecois largely run the Army, the Civil Service, the CBC, etc. Pierre Trudeau, the father of the current Prime Minister, he dealt with this by making Canadian identity even murkier, by adopting official multiculturalism, which came about because of pressure from, curiously enough, Ukrainian Canadians. Ukrainians had come to Canada roughly around the turn of the last century in large numbers, where they were deposited in rural Alberta mostly, and sink or swim. There was no welfare state at the time. They were given plots of land, If they made it work, great. If they didn't, well, they could freeze or starve or go home. The Ukrainians in Canada felt a persecution by the Anglos. The Anglos, it's true, did look down on them and mock them for their clothing and their accents, etc. And the message to them was to become Canadian, stop acting like foreigners. And they resented this. And the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress pushed for a recognition of cultures, official recognition of cultures other than English and French. And so we got multiculturalism. Now, Pierre Trudeau drove a stake through the very idea of Canadianism in 1971 when he said, national unity, if it is to mean anything in the deeply personal sense, must be founded on confidence in one's own individual identity. So you see that the idea of patriotism is destroyed at a stroke, because instead of a nation, and there was about 21 million people in Canada at that time, we just have a group of random individual identities. And Pierre Trudeau went even further. He gave a speech to the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress announcing official multiculturalism, and he said uniformity is neither desirable nor possible in a country the size of Canada. We should not even be able to agree upon the kind of Canadian to choose as a model, let alone persuade most people to emulate it. There are few policies potentially more disastrous for Canada than to tell all Canadians that they must be alike. There is no such thing as a model or ideal Canadian. What could be more absurd than the concept of an all-Canadian boy or girl? A society which emphasizes uniformity is one which creates intolerance and hate. A society which eulogizes the average citizen is one which breeds mediocrity. What the world should be seeking, and what in Canada we must continue to cherish, are not concepts of uniformity, but human values, compassion, love, and understanding. So essentially what he did was to turn Canada on its head. Everything that had been thought Canadian was now considered treasonous, and everything treasonous was now defined as patriotic. Canada's immigration laws were fundamentally changed in 1967, 2 years after the Hart-Celler Bill was passed in the United States. And the purpose and the result was essentially the same. There was a what you might call a white Canadian policy in immigration, that immigrants came largely from Britain until 1967. Now the number of immigrants from Britain and the United States is negligible. Immigrants have come in enormous numbers, millions upon millions, from the third world, especially from places like Jamaica, Haiti, China, India, and lately Somalia, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka. The Tamils, the minority in Sri Lanka, are now a significant political force. So the result has been that politics in Canada are increasingly a struggle of one ethnic group against another. Vancouver is now a minority city, as is Toronto, our largest city. And the candidates are appealing to their own ethnic group, just as Lee Kuan Yew predicted. And what happened there's something very amusing that happened before this latest controversy in Burnaby, which is that Shin, the Korean candidate, took aim at Jagmeet Singh for having been a defense lawyer, for having defended criminals, essentially calling him a friend of criminals. Now, perhaps because this fellow Shin is Korean, he doesn't understand the Anglo-American tradition that all people have the right to legal counsel. And we do not look down at lawyers because they defend criminals, because, as I say, that is the tradition that everyone has the right to a legal defense. Now, Karen Wang came a cropper when a message written in Chinese was discovered on a social media site, which she claims was written by a subordinate without her knowledge, but that she boasted that she was the only Chinese candidate in the race. Now, I guess everyone would know this. Everyone, all the ethnicities are, they're very clear about this already. Why it needed to be emphasized is an interesting question. But the Sikhs and the Chinese, to give two examples, do not like each other. They consider each other rivals. Sikhs will not vote for a Chinese candidate, and Chinese will not vote for a Sikh candidate. I remember when Ujjal Dosanjh, who is Sikh, became Premier of British Columbia after he was voted in at a leadership convention, which was held at the Pacific Coliseum, a hockey stadium, which holds 15,000 in Vancouver. I remember watching the convention on television and noting that I couldn't see any Chinese faces. I watched, I don't know, for half an hour, I didn't see a single Chinese face. In other words, that the Chinese, who are very powerful in British Columbia in all sorts of ways, had turned against the New Democratic Party for the reason that it had chosen a Sikh leader. Now, so all hell broke loose when it was discovered that Karen Wang, the campaign had pointed out that she was the only Chinese candidate. Now, it is now common in Canada for advertising in political elections to be done in languages other than English. And all sorts of claims and charges and counterclaims are made. And the difficulty that the general public has, and the political parties themselves, is that they don't know the languages. So they don't know the messages that are being put out. And so the Liberal Party indicated that Karen Wang was in very serious trouble, basically because she had told the truth, that she had exposed a truth about a multicultural Canada that you are not supposed to say. Essentially, that there is no longer any unity in this country, that people vote, all except for white people, vote for the ethnic candidates whose ethnicity corresponds with their own. And Karen Wang was pressured to drop out, which she did. And then the situation became farcical because she said that she wanted back in, and the Liberals said that, no, you can't come back in. And then she wanted to hold a press conference at a library in Burnaby, and she was refused access because the library said, no, you can't hold a press conference in here, which sounds strange to me. Now she is talking about running as an independent candidate. All this takes place in the context of Jagmeet Singh being a very weak New Democratic Party leader. It's not simply that he's a Sikh. He observes the 7 Ks, and he is a bit of fashion plate. So his turban, which must be worn at all times, is often canary yellow, or similarly other lurid colors. He has a kind of maniacal look, such that we have a man with a name which is deeply strange to most Canadians, and he looks like a cartoon villain. I pointed out at the time of his selection as leader that he was going to be a bust, but no one was paying attention because the NDP and the media were all congratulating themselves, showing just how diverse and inclusive Canada is. The NDP's records in by-elections, both federal and provincial, since Singh was selected, has been absolutely dismal, running at 10% or less. Oh, I should point out that until fairly recently, Jagmeet Singh was known as Jimmy Dalawal. And it would appear that he changed his name in order to appear more Sikh.
Here he is, Jagmeet Singh. Hello, Jug. Nice to see you.
Jagmeet, pleasure to see you, man.
He don't call you Jug.
No.
No, not at all.
No jokes.
Already.
Which is sort of a anti-charisma. And he is so weak that it has been speculated for some time that the New Democratic Party is liable to be wiped out, or largely wiped out, in the election which is going to be held, the federal election, which will be held this fall, such that it is rumored that the Liberals want him to win in Burnaby. If he loses, there is enough time for the New Democrats to choose a new leader, because he would almost certainly be forced out if he loses this seat. But the Liberals, it is said, they want him there because they know that New Democrat votes are liable to migrate from the NDP to the Liberals. And despite the fact that the Conservatives under Andrew Scheer have recovered quite well from the losses that they suffered the last time around under Stephen Harper, it wouldn't make any difference if NDP support collapses, because the second choice of NDP voters is overwhelming the Liberal Party and not the Conservative Party. So I mention all this. I know that Canada is not particularly interesting to Americans, but once again, I offer up Canada as an object lesson of what you do not want to do in the United States. Multiculturalism in the United States is unofficial rather than official. Essentially, it makes no difference. But what happens when you have the doctrine of multiculturalism coupled with large-scale third world immigration is that nationhood disappears. Oh, I should mention that the Conservatives clapped themselves on the back because they said that Karen Wang had attempted to sought the Conservative nomination and had been turned down. Because she's a racist or some such thing. The Conservative Party has been playing the game of liberals are the real racists for a very long time. Not that it's gotten them anywhere. The Conservatives are desperate not to appear racist and are desperate to be even more pro-immigrant than the Liberal Party, which would be quite something. And everyone is in favor of higher and higher immigration. Justin Trudeau wants to raise immigration levels from 300,000 a year to 450,000 a year. The number of people coming into Canada every year is about 500,000. About 200,000 of those are supposed to leave because they're students or on temporary visas, but we know that a large number of them do not. Canada is in the position where roughly around 2035, it is going to become minority. Previously, the Liberal Party in particular, had run white candidates in ethnic areas as unifiers, because this got around the problem of Sikhs not willing to vote for Chinese or Chinese not willing to vote for Sikhs, etc., etc. But the absolute numbers of minorities in Canada's city have become so large that the minorities have decided that they no longer need white stooges. They want to run themselves. And we are very close in Canada to a situation of the war of all against all. And Canadians will be learning at first hand that the minorities of the world who have come en masse to Canada do not like each other. Actually, they hate each other. And again, when the white stooges are pushed aside, we are going to see very bitter battles between all the various different minorities. There's a significant black minority in Canada now. 45 years ago, there were no black people to speak of in Canada, something like 34,000 in the whole country. We have significant Filipino minority. We have significant minorities from, as I mentioned, countries like Afghanistan. And the whole world has come to Canada, and the whole world hates each other. And so now Canada is going to become a battleground for the whole world. This was a deliberate policy of our government, of liberal and conservative governments, that in 1967, the year that the immigration policy was changed, was the year of Canada's centenary, 100th anniversary of it becoming a British Dominion, which means home rule. It was arguably the best country of the world in 1867, and our elite and our leaders decided to destroy it for fun and for spite.
Hi-ho, the best man in Ottawa was Muckeraw Joe. Muckeraw Joe, Big Joe Muckeraw,